I think for Lerer Hippeau, focusing on helping with the portfolio and help share their stories. And, the firm itself, it was just an amazing experience. And I learned so much given also Lerer Hippeau was a generalist investor. So being able to learn so much about so many different categories and writing why we invested content was such a good learning experience.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the PlayBridge podcast. Today, we are joined by Natalie Sportelli. She's the director at Bullish, a consumer venture capital firm and creative agency based in New York. She previously joined Thingtesting, a B2B platform for brands, as employee number 4 and has worked across journalism as an associate editor at Forbes and served as a director at venture capital firm Lerer Hippeau. So excited to finally have Natalie on. We met a few months ago now in New York, so it's awesome to have you on here. To start us off, you're currently the director at Bullish, an early stage VC firm, as I mentioned. Can you just start by level setting what is Bullish and what do you do there?
Yeah, so Bullish is a consumer-only venture capital firm, early stage focus, and brand consultancy. So we have a fund team, we have a creative team, and we work together and also separately, depending on kind of what the tasks are. But we were founded by 2 Deutsche alums. So coming from a marketing background, they believed in the power of marketing being a fuel for growth, and then saw opportunity to launch and start deploying from a fund to kind of bet more on those companies that really understood consumers.
And your role there, where do you play into Bullish and the whole team?
Yeah, so I sit on the fund team, and my responsibilities are helping source new investments, looking for early stage consumer deals. The funny thing with consumer is that one minute you could be talking to like a frozen pizza brand and then, an AI dating app. So just seeing a whole number of things. The things that show up on my desk sometimes really surprise me still. And in addition to serving on the fund team, sourcing investments, I also oversee Bullish's own marketing. So given my background in content brand, it's kind of a little bit of a opportunity to use those skill sets to help share like the Bullish proposition to get in front of more people and kind of have more people understand like our perspective on consumer and what we look for in investments.
Very cool. I think one of the most difficult parts about investing is just the range of different industries and deals that you can be looking at. Like I find that to be very overwhelming because how could you possibly be an expert in all of those fields? And I know Bullish has invested in companies like Warby Parker and Casper, but can you help us understand a little bit more about what your team is currently focusing on? What themes, what stage, what sectors are you guys excited about?
We do early stage, so we're pre-seed, seed, Series A, and we're really open to seeing anything in consumer as long as the consumer is paying and it's a US-based business. We're really interested in speaking with those founders. We're seeing like a lot of activity around, like what does this next wave of like more sustainable, profitable businesses look like? I think like the companies who are able to like learn and take notes from the Pelotons and Warbys, which were both Bullish investments, moving forward, like where attention is just so impossible to capture. We're really kind of looking for these companies that are the next wave of consumer brands because they're understanding kind of at a deeper level, like how to sell into, built-in communities where you have people who are paying attention to already. I think that's why we're really excited, for example, about creator-led brands. I think we've seen like a little bit of back and forth on celebrity-led brands, influencer-led brands, but the main thinking there is like if you have an audience that is really energized and excited to receive you, like we'd love to see companies like that.
And your experience with content as well, what is like, do you find that there's a pretty big difference between like a celebrity-led brand versus a creator-led brand, and how do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think it depends on kind of the type of fan you have. I think that sometimes the line can be really thin. I mean, sometimes you can think about a celebrity-led brand where there's always been celebrity endorsements. So is this more of like a celebrity has put their stamp on it or they use this product and they post a certain amount per month? But then you could also look at Selena Gomez and Rare Beauty and, Hailey Bieber and say, wow, it looks like they're really focused on like listening to their consumers and their audience. I think that's really the combination factor of like these successful brands is like you're consulting your audience, you're getting feedback from your community to develop new things. And I really get excited about those types of companies. You have a product council, you're running things by, and then you can see like the social proof where the brand is like, you've asked for a cleanser for 20 months, and here are all of the different like requests for that. So I think that's where like the feedback loop comes in kind of more generally. And if you don't know who that customer is, and you're just trying to like launch a cool brand, I think it's going to be a really big uphill battle to figure out who those people are and capture their attention.
Something about Rhode and Rare Beauty just feels so much more like genuine and authentic. And you just like really know that those celebrities like really care and are like actually creating those products versus, to your point, like people now I feel like see through when it's just like a celebrity stamp of approval.
Yeah, and I mean they're building huge businesses too. With when you think of Fenty and you think of Skims, these are just massive businesses, and they're growing and growing. And I think it is like that integration of the personality with the using the product and talking to people and seeing how they're using the product and going from there. So I do think like creator led speaking to people built in go to market. It also like doesn't need to be like a creator brand at all. If you're selling into, for example, people who ride bikes, we have a company that builds or that creates really exciting like biking accessories called Thousand. And so bikers are a very passionate community, runners are a very passionate community. I really like seeing companies that they're able to identify like a group of people extremely energized about the product. And again, I think that's a way to win when you're getting thrown a million Instagram ads. Instagram knows I'm looking for a couch right now, and it's just a nightmare.
Oh boy, I have to shout out my favorite couch that I found on Instagram. Like when they were getting started, I tell everyone about this Sixpenny. Truly,
Okay, great.
highly, highly recommend. Love
I
them.
hope my phone hears that, so now I
Their
can see them on my
their
feed.
phone is definitely gonna hear that, and yeah, you're gonna get sent down the whole Sixpenny rabbit hole. But I'm their number one
Perfect.
fan and customer, so
Okay, great. Yeah, I've been really in the weeds because I'm moving. So, and that also fits into a lot of the different brands for renters we're seeing. I don't know if you've seen this on social, but there's this trend like I'm not getting my deposit back, and it's these renters who are doing the most unbelievably beautiful renovations to their apartments, and anything from shower head replacements. We've seen Jolie, which is a company that's doing really well in like a filtered shower head. Like brands for renters are really going to be taken off given the fact that people aren't buying houses. So that's a trend we're watching, for example, home renovation. I'm so jealous of all these people who know how to like sand wood. That is not my skill set at all, but good for them.
yeah, I wish I was the person that could like redo a whole place, but that's just not in me. My friend like did her whole dorm room in college like that, and it was like magical, and I really wished I could create that kind of happy place for myself, but not in me. That's okay.
Yeah. And I think that just fits into like a more macroeconomic trend, which we just did a really good piece on that, which was, you know, consumers don't make spending decisions in a vacuum. You think about interest rates, you think about, where investments are going on the supply side with the government, and like the elderly will have a lot more money to spend given policy changes, people getting like tax rebates to make eco-friendly improvements for their homes. Like there's money kind of coming in on the top here, but where does it kind of filter down to consumers? Like what you have in your wallet versus like what's available kind of externally to the world is just really interesting when you think about that. And isn't just like, do I like this brand? It's like, where are you prioritizing your money? What trickles down to you? And like, what are those implications? That is also really interesting.
Definitely. Are there any like specific, you know, startups or companies or spaces that you're personally looking to invest in like the next year or so, or like anything really exciting that you want to see?
Yeah, it's really interesting because given my background where I had a lot of exposure to kind of CPG and D2C companies, a lot of the companies I've been spending time with are more in the services, apps, marketplace world. And, they're interacting with brands or they're connecting consumers with brands as well. But, I think I'm looking at a lot around marketplaces focused on resale. I'm kind of interested in like the peer-to-peer marketplaces. I think I'm really interested in like the unbundling of Reddit and kind of like new kind of content community commerce models is really interesting. Of course, AI, we've spent a lot of time thinking about like what are the most painful like consumer experiences that could be solved with AI. And, for one example, I really love this one company that is B2B called Sienna, which is like an AI customer service chatbot. That's great. Like, I don't really like talking to people for customer service. Like, if it's a good chatbot, that's great. So I think that kind of more generally, companies that are emotional decisions are really interesting to me. Companies where, you're solving like a pain point where all your existing options really stink. For example, I'm seeing like a number of AI vertical search engines. So like I'm looking for specific furniture. Okay, this is going to help scan the web. Or like I'm looking to shop for this specific thing. Okay, this AI will like scan the web. So like what's something that is going to improve something that already is a bad customer experience, with AI specifically? And then also, around app services, marketplaces, like what are some opportunities for people to have like more seamless experiences, right? Kind of just more overall, as you're thinking about brands and how consumers are spending money and interacting with each other in the coming years.
I would love to see something like Sienna applied to the airline customer service. That I just am so excited for that because it is absolutely terrible. Spent
We
like
need it.
5 hours on the phone the other day with United, and it was like, how is this still happening?
I don't like tweeting at brands unless it's complimenting them because I know it doesn't go where it should go, and like those people should not have to deal with that. But tweeting at airlines is my only like vice on that specific area for sure.
Sometimes I think it's the only way for them to listen and get your attention. So, fortunately, sometimes you
And
have to do it.
it has worked. It has worked. So that's just feeding into the loop, unfortunately. So whatever.
So it sounds like you're really on the investing side at Bullish, but you also do a good amount of the marketing as well. So what does that piece of your role look like at Bullish?
Yeah. So that looks like helping with our newsletter. I'm doing a lot of editing of our content, our social. Getting our website to where it needs to be, and really just kind of making people more aware of us as consumer only investor and what we're looking for. I think one thing that is so important with the reasons why that VCs want to do content, want to do community, and this was a role that I had previously, is like recency theory. If you see someone pop up on your LinkedIn and you're like, oh, I should send them that, then just kind of that being top of mind is really valuable. And I think that, breaking out of existing networks too is really important, because when you get an intro from a founder who knows someone who should know you, that is really helpful and it brings in deal flow. And I think that motivating your community, making them feel connected, making them feel like you're listening to them or providing content that's going to help them get better at their jobs, I think is really important. So for us at Bullish, it's really about how are we sharing our points of view, sharing our, really thoughtful consumer insights that are valuable. We just did this post about the virtue of vices, which was really fun, which was basically saying that a lot of younger people aren't drinking as much, but they're not buying non-alcoholic things. It's kind of like people
Interesting.
want to, yeah, it's kind of like people saying they want to eat less meat, but then they're not necessarily buying meatless products.
Yeah.
Like, so then the thinking is like, well, if they don't want these direct alternatives, what are they doing instead? Like, where are they spending that money? And, for the non-alcoholic drinks, what we've actually found is that, Gen Z, they're smoking a lot more. There's like a really record amount of cannabis use and psychedelics and overall just drug use. So then the question is like, what are the companies that will kind of fit this tension where people are not drinking as much, but then using these other drugs? Are there opportunities for like vaping cessation drugs? Like, are there ways to offboard people from habits that they don't really want, or make the things that they're really looking for? For example, let's say you're drinking with friends, that's a social activity. Are there other ways to socialize that aren't focused on drinking? For example, like competitive sports. So like Top Golfs of the world, like I've been seeing some things in that category. How can you connect with people and socialize without alcohol, without smoking together? So, that's just one example of like a consumer insight that we spent time on and like I was working on. that I think shows an interesting point of view, because often with consumers, they lie about what they want and they don't shop logically. So then you kind of have to think about like, well, me as a consumer, like I do that too. So then how would I think like myself for other people? It's funny.
So fascinating. Well, I was going to ask you, why is content important in venture capital? But you've literally answered that for me. I obviously very much believe in the power of content as an investor, being in the startup community, whatever. But I feel like a few years ago, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like it's become more and more powerful and more investors are looking to build out the content. But it sounds like you maybe built this from the ground up at Lerer Hippeau. So how did you pitch that to them? How did you convince them that there was like really value there? And also was just be curious about your strategy for building out their content and maybe how that differs from the Bullish strategy.
Yeah, I have to say that my former boss at Lerer Hippeau, Stephanie Manning Cohen, was like a visionary at this. She was kind of able at the time that I was thinking about leaving Forbes, and we were having conversations just to say, I think that content is going to be more important to VC firms over time in order to get in front of people, build a brand, have the brand be as strong as a portfolio. And that was, a lot of the thinking. And so when I was looking to leave Forbes for a new opportunity where I could kind of work more closely with startups, that was really kind of my goal. We had a conversation and they were hiring a content manager. And so it was, VC was totally new to me, but I had the content background given that I was just in journalism. So it was really fun and amazing challenge to think of like, what does this look like for the firm? And I think for any firm, my advice is like, what do you have to work with? Like, what is the baseline? And your baseline is an email list. So like build a newsletter right away. And then if you're joining a firm that has a newsletter, make that newsletter really great because you already have a distribution engine there. Then build up the content, then share in social, and then it kind of all becomes this like virtuous cycle of publishing, right? Where you feel like you're kind of always present. And I think for Lerer Hippeau, focusing on helping with the portfolio and help share their stories and the firm itself, it was just an amazing experience, and I learned so much. Given also Lerer Hippeau was a generalist investor, so being able to learn so much about so many different categories and writing why we invested content was such a good learning experience. And I think for Bullish, being a consumer-only investor, consumers are a huge category. So it is constantly learning, and so much of it is kind of explaining briefing, the why we invested, the what's exciting, the why this company. I think any person who, works in VC, you feel overwhelmed with like, why is this the company? Like if you haven't looked at every single, let's say a vertical AI search engine in X category, how do you know that is the one? And so I grapple with this too. And I think being able to understand why investors see promise in specific things is like one of the most valuable things content can do, especially as you want to, get more deal flow in, but then also reiterate your thesis and point of view.
I also think it just helps founders really understand you as investors, and there's like a huge value add there as well.
And they feel like they get to know you. That's the whole point of putting content out, right? It's like they feel like you're more accessible and you're reachable. I answered cold Twitter DMs and LinkedIn messages all the time. And I found one of my favorite, like we got very far with it deals via like a cold Twitter DM. It's a very good company. And I was like, I'm glad that people feel like they can reach out to me because they like my content, right?
So it sounds like you started your career in journalism, then went to VC, worked in content with a VC, then worked at a startup, then back to VC as an investor. Will you just walk us through like your career transitions and kind of how do you made those pivots?
It all makes sense. Like looking back, I always just trying to optimize for like what points of view do I want to collect? Like what are learning, like what do I want to learn next? That's always really guided me. So starting at Forbes after graduation, I was working on the entrepreneurs vertical and helping build the under 30 brand and franchise, which at the time like was still pretty new. And now today it's like a whole thing. It's like a meme, which like hurts me because it is so a huge amount of work and research. But so I was doing that for 2.5 years, and I knew that I wanted to work more closely with founders, but there wasn't like a particular startup that I wanted to jump into. So that's kind of why I sent that message to my former boss at Lerer Hippeau was I'd love to learn, about content for firms. Like what's content for your portfolio look like? At that point, I was still thinking like maybe there's a startup in their portfolio I want to work for. And then it was like, oh, well, this sounds like an awesome opportunity. What a cool job. And so I did that for a little over 3 years. And during that time, it was so funny because, I gained so much valuable experience. I had so much exposure to things, but I also became very intent on the fact that I needed to go work for a startup. So it was kind of like writing about startups and then supporting.
Why did you feel like you really needed to work at a startup?
I think like I needed to see what happened on the inside. And I think that was partly like the reporter background where founders and people tell the stories that they want to tell the reporters, and the reporters' jobs is to like figure out what the real story is. And then so I understood like the media point of view of like how stories get told by startups, right? And then with Lerer Hippeau, it was like, what are some challenges startups deal with that firms can help with? And then also like how do startups build their brand? How do firms build their brand? And during that experience, it was like, well, I want to help build a brand now myself. And so I had met founder of Thingtesting at kind of like a professional event summit type thing. I started following the product. I really loved the product, really loved the mission. And when they were hiring their fourth employee focused on content, I was like, oh my gosh, well, this would be such an amazing immersion of getting operating experience, building a company with someone who I believe in and the mission I want to kind of help see through. And I did that for 2 years. And so again, it was kind of like collecting the perspective of media perspective on startups, supporting startups as a firm, working at a startup. And then the next piece was obviously like learning how to invest in startups. So now it's kind of like, oh, yeah, but yeah, only in retrospect.
I do think it's very helpful having had the startup experience to then just like have that perspective and like understanding of like how insane and crazy it can be within these organizations.
It's also funny because 100%. And then I also talk with founders. Like I was talking to a founder the other day, and they were talking about their TikTok strategy. And like I helped build a TikTok strategy, and we were talking about like conversion off social, and I helped do that. So it is kind of like another level outside of just company building, but like tactically, especially on the content marketing side, being able to say, well, here are some things to try, in addition to being able to evaluate, like, well, actually, that's not that unique like of a go to market, given like what I had experienced myself. So it's been incredibly helpful to be able to apply that knowledge in this job for sure.
Yeah. I feel like go to market is a massive value add to any early stage founder.
And sometimes you can go to market multiple times in consumer. So like you could redo it if no one paid attention the first time.
Okay, so then how did you learn how to be an investor? Like, how did you learn venture capital and all of like the more technical sides of that?
Yeah, so I'm still 100% still learning. I had, incredible exposure at Lerer Hippeau to the companies that we were seeing, and then as well as the companies we were investing in. But the things that I'm learning now since I joined Bullish in September are very much around, what are some metrics to look for? What differentiates the company? What to look for in a really strong founder? And, just like things that are really compelling and interesting. I feel like I'm really drawn to things that are fragmented marketplaces. Like if something really surprises me, I love it because it just kind of clicks and it makes sense. Like, why hasn't someone done that before? So yeah, I say like right now it's really about evaluating how strong a business is. And sometimes even we would be investing so early, it's based off of the concept or it's really based off the team. So yeah, I'm kind of just at this point navigating, what are the core metrics for evaluating really promising consumer companies moving forward? Gross margins, very important. Repeat purchase rates, very important. And besides all of those things, just like, is this a really interesting or like novel concept? Is this the right founder to build this team? And so I'm learning more of like the logistics from the GPs here, which has been phenomenally helpful as I've been working on deal flow and evaluating things coming in.
Is there anything that has surprised you recently and excited you that you can share?
Yeah, I got pretty far with like an AI ed tech company, and
Interesting.
I think one thing that I'll mention on AI for consumer is when you look at the percent adoption of AI with Gen Z, it's like over 60%. It's unbelievably high. And when you think about too like AI consumer applications, if Gen Z is in school, then they're probably trying to figure out how to not do homework, and AI
Yes.
is a good way to do that. So it is really interesting when you think about like the cultural trends intersecting with the availability of new technology all the time, saying like you can't just like slap a new technology onto a consumer application and have it make sense. It has to really fit with like a core behavior. We think about like behavior shifts happen when you get married or when you move or when you get a dog, and then you have new opportunities to buy things. But shifting existing behavior outside of like core moments is hard. So like, how are you building products that fit into existing behavior trends and routines? And
Yes.
that is why coffee subscriptions or like pet care is going to have such a big year. Beauty M&A is going to have a huge year. Like all of these things that are just part of our lives and that we want to spend money on. um, I just think it's like very promising to me.
So a lot of VCs, just in the headlines, are shifting or just like completely going away from consumer. So this is going to come up corny, but why is your team bullish on consumer?
We use that all the time, so it's not corny. It's literally like our key pun. So
Amazing. I love it.
yeah, I mean, I think that it's easy to write off, consumer companies, but I think that when you think about like where the economy is powered by, like the joke is that like the economy was like run on Taylor Swift and Barbie last
Yeah.
year.
But like
It's like
actually, it's
not
wild.
like B2B SaaS. So, and it is really interesting because like when you look at, for example, like the some of the last few IPOs like were mostly consumer companies. So I think like overall right now with consumer, like the companies that will be funded are just going to be really like top tier given like people refocusing, right? So I think like there's going to be less competition for deals if people are moving away from consumer, which means that you can have a high bar for what you're looking at. It means that you're probably going to get in at a lower valuation, which means that you're setting up the company for more success later. I think a lot of companies in consumer were valued more like tech companies, and they were trying to achieve these multiples that like just did not make sense. But when you look at companies uh, like Stanley Cup, which is just hilarious to me, like those are crazy numbers.
Wild.
And it's not like really a fluke when you think about Crocs, when you think about all of these brands that like have been around a long time and then have a big cultural resurgence. Like I think it's like 60 or 70% of like consumer spending is like driving like US GDP. So and like our whole economy is driven on consumer spending. So consumers are spending. And so I think identifying the companies that will be, like the viral breakouts, but some of those are also just building a long time. I get really excited by these consumer companies that people are like, oh, are you paying attention to this? It's like, well, now I am, because it just kind of hit everyone overnight. But some of these companies have been in business a long time and they're just like now having a moment. Yeah. I mean, Birkenstock went public. Like,
Yeah.
that's a shoe brand, and I don't know. I think that companies in consumer like are just quietly bigger than people think. And so then they kind of just discount them a little bit.
I mean, I personally agree that, you know, the spaces that people are like ignoring often tend to be places where there's big opportunity because you're seeing something clearly that others do not see. So,
Yeah.
agree on that. What do you think? Like, can you explain to people maybe why investors are like fearful of more consumer brands and companies and investing in that space and why investors are going towards B2B?
Yeah. I think that, the basic answer to that is like cost of customer acquisition, digital spending on ads. The money is not going as far as it used to with getting eyes on it. iOS, like you can't track people as efficiently. So it's just much harder to figure out who your customer is and get their attention. And I think that, a lot of money going to marketing is just not something that firms like to see in general. For us, it's like we want to be investing in companies that have like some kind of innate quality where they can grow without spending a lot on marketing. So then when they spend on marketing, it's super effective. So I think that too, like when you think about like a really big B2B contract and it's like a $20,000 thing, it's like, wow, okay. So like the AOV on this one customer is much bigger than someone buying, razors, but then also Harry's is a massive company. So it's really interesting to think about it that way. I think just in general, I think consumer companies now just need to build more thoughtfully, and I think that they will, given that there's just the money's not going to be as readily available as it used to be. And also the categories are really crowded. So like when you do see something that is really interesting or novel, you kind of have a big opportunity. I'm going to use Jolie as another example where it's like it's a filtered shower head and they're doing very well, and so this is a kind of boring area, but you're building something and then putting a personality around it, which makes it cool.
Well, I was going to say, is that creator led? Because I think the first part of what you said in terms of like running ads and stuff and the cost of customer acquisition just goes back to the power and the future of having creator led business.
We have an investment in a company called August, which is a period care brand. And Nadia has like a huge TikTok account and she talks about August, but then she also talks about, period like topics, the tampon tax, like everything around kind of like menstruation and for menstruators. And I think like in general, her being active on social media and creating content builds like a halo around August in general. And I think like that was really exciting to us. That investment happened before I came here, but I was aware of August well before I joined Bullish, given, she just had kind of carved this area where it feels like the most relevant, period care brand for Gen Z.
What she's doing amazing. I actually invested in a syndicate that SoGal Ventures led into August. So love nice. August.
Co-investors.
I mean, if you're on the internet, it's like hard to miss what she's doing and the brand she's building. And what's so interesting about August that really resonated with me is that like I don't really feel like anyone has like a tampon brand that they gravitate towards, or at least I never did. And I just like that really clicked for me in my brain of like, oh, why this is so amazing. Because she's really created a viral brand around it, which is fascinating.
Yeah. And you think it's funny. It's like, why does this person have, like, why me as a consumer should I have a relationship with my grill or with my, shower head or with my razor? And I think it's partly like you want to just keep buying from it because you think the quality is good, because you like it, the aesthetic, you think the mission, it's a good value. That's one thing I learned at Thingtesting for sure is like people want like a good value. They want a like product that delivers on quality, like if you just are building something where you can get a decent amount of sales for something that just looks nice and photographs well on Instagram, but like you're not going to get repeat customers if you buy it and you're actually kind of disappointed with the quality, because Caraway is a great example of like they've built out this whole suite now and they're doing really well because they launched an initial product, people thought it was good, and then you keep building out from there. But it really goes back to like, is this a good value and does it work well?
So for this season of the podcast, I'm asking investors to choose a VC term, a startup term, a concept, whatever you want, and debunk it or explain it for us. So do you have anything in mind? And can you explain it?
Yeah, it's so funny because it's the same one as one of our managing partners, which is TAM. So amazing. Total addressable market.
It's an important one.
And consumer is so funny. Because you could say like, all like English language speakers in the US, all teens.
Yes.
Because realistically, that is not going to be true for a lot of brands. So for example, if you're making like a luxury beauty product and your TAM is people who wear makeup, it's not true, right? It's like, it's going to be people with a certain household income that are spending this much on beauty products a year. And you're likely to get, this much from them over time. And I just don't think that TAM is that helpful. Also, I think you can see that, the total, I don't know how you would characterize like the TAM for Stanley Cups, to use that example again. Like people who drink water? No, people who use cups?
I don't know. That's why I've always struggled with TAM because like sometimes you're just like this just feels like an absolute wild guess. Like, I mean, they probably could have never predicted like anyone and everyone is using a Stanley Cup basically at this point in time.
Yeah, and like to use like kind of a different example, like when Elmo asked everyone how they were doing on Twitter, right? And like the people who responded to this tweet from a Sesame Street character who was like, "How's everybody doing?" was like not kids. It
Wait, that's
was like
amazing.
millennials having a hard time. And so it's just funny because like I don't think you can really anticipate or you can dig in as much as humanly possible. But understanding your customer and how much they're willing to spend on your product is important. And you can't just say your customer is everybody because it's not. So it's a fun one.
Do you have like a recent example of like a pitch you've heard that has like explained their market size well? And, maybe if you can provide some advice around how founders should be explaining it.
That's a really good question. I just sent an email today asking more about that customer demographic question. So I feel like also maybe like when I'm looking at slides, it's like I almost want to see more like personas than TAM. Here are a couple types of like, and that's a little bit more of a marketing thing anyway, right? It's like here's the type of person that would buy, um, you know, a let's say probiotic soda brand. Like who, like how can you get as much information on that person as possible? So it's more likely to not have like enough insights also just because you maybe don't have enough customers or have spent enough time getting to know your customer to like have a relevant like percentage of TAM.
Yes.
You
It's
know, I
not
think
just like every millennial, basically.
I think advice for founders on that is like who are your best customers and like where do they live? I was doing diligence on a company the other day and it was like they were living in way outside of the coast, right? And it was interesting because I was like, oh, I wonder how this company found its way to you because I would have assumed it was more of like a coastal type application. It was not. So I think who your best customers are is a good way to get around overall kind of broad numbers. I think is helpful to fit in that person's consumer purchase behavior.
I love that perspective because yeah, TAM is just like, I don't know. It can be, I think, confusing and stressful and you don't want to feel like you're like making something up and I could go on. And then as we start to wrap things up, can you share a female founder, investor, or leader who inspires you and a bit about why?
Yeah, so I'm gonna call out she's also my friend, but Ashley Mayer, who's GP and co-founder at Coalition Operators, I think is amazing. She was head of comms at Glossier, was leading comms at Box and Social Capital, and she's just so extremely smart. Her network is amazing, but also she's a good example of having like a very um, you know, a very developed expertise like outside of finance and then being able to be like so helpful and so beneficial to all her portfolio companies. And given my own background with content, brand, social marketing world before going into the investing side of things, like I really admire being able to translate that skill set and then being able to find source and support companies with that very specific value add, right? I think a lot of firms want to try to figure out what their value add is, but when you look at kind of their past work experiences, they're of course can help you with a lot of different things. But having like a skill set that's outside of investing, I think is really great because sometimes I can talk to founders and they've never had any exposure with XYZ topic. And then you can kind of like shorten the distance for them on that. And I think like Ashley's just a really amazing example of like super strong investor, has an incredible like resume, built up expertise to be extra helpful to those founders. So and now she has her own fund. I think she's great.
I don't think I've met Ashley yet, but she sounds awesome. And that reminds me of one question that I missed earlier is especially for people not coming from like a traditional finance background, which has like a very clear path to VC. What advice do you have for people looking to break into VC and what were some strategies that you used?
Yeah, so I think knowing how to pitch yourself is really important and knowing what your narrative is. I think a lot of people don't think about pitching themselves. I think they say, like, how can I help your firm? Right? What makes you a great person to be of value to that firm? Right? Like, what's your kind of unique point of view or strategy that you want to bring in? and deploy there. And I think that, having like relevant expertise, having like a background, having a knowledge skill set area is really, really good. So people trying to break into VC, it's like, what can you bring to a firm where they might not have that coverage, right? Have you spent a lot of time studying like enterprise companies and they need more coverage there? Or, could a firm really need a really benefit from a community person because like they haven't done anything externally and you have that unique skill set. So I think that it feels like when a lot of people are trying to do VC recruiting, they're not thinking about like what they can bring to a firm and pitching themselves as like filling a need there versus like, here's how we could work together, right? It's like, what can you bring and like deliver to the firm, and be able to like fit in and benefit mutually, obviously. But so yeah, being able to pitch yourself and like why you should be at a firm and like what you can do there, and then just the narrative of your own background, because like when I connect the dots of like my job, like my career, it makes a lot of sense because it was always like, well, then I wanted to learn X, then I wanted to learn X, and then given what I had done before, it made sense about why I should hope I would potentially be good in this role because I'd be able to tap into the network, be able to take all the learnings and like leverage those things. So I think that pitching and developing like a narrative and a point of view is really important. And it might feel really uncomfortable doing that for some people, but just creating like a story arc around your career and why you should be in venture, I think is a really good exercise, and getting more comfortable with it just takes practice.
I love that. And it reminded me of a recent tweet from Nicole De Tomaso. She like literally did a whole pitch deck of why Harlem Capital should hire her, which is epic. And
Love
one of the slides was like a picture of all of the partners at the firm and then basically a picture of herself, and it like showed how she fit in. I can't remember exactly what, but it was like, these people lead community, I'm going to do this, these partners have this experience. And I just thought that was like so smart and unique, and just goes back to pitch yourself, show how you will really bring something to that firm. So I think that is amazing advice.
The thing to keep in mind too is like if you're an investor and you're hearing founders pitch themselves all day, and then they have a conversation with someone who wants to work with them too, and like actually have a real relationship again, like when you're investing in a company, it's like a very long, it's like 7+ year relationship usually. And if you're joining a company and sitting on the team, could be that long too. So I just think that like bringing energy too is so important. I know it's sometimes hard depending on like how introverted you are. Like if I'm in a pitch and I feel like the founder is bored or has something else to do or isn't focused, I feel really bad, but I'm just like not going to feel as engaged in the conversation because like I'll feel like, oh my gosh, did I do something?
I've been on those pitch calls before where I'm like,
right?
let's just move on.
It's also my fault because I schedule a lot for Friday.
Yeah, so you like do them all at once.
And then I'm like,
tired.
Are they tired? Yeah. Are they tired? Because I just like have a coffee and slap my face a couple times and like ready to go. Yeah, but so yeah, just bringing energy, because if they're hearing pitches all day, like you've got to compete with the attention span of that too.
Amazing. Well, I feel like we could talk for literally 3 hours. This has been so fun. And just finally, where can people find you? Where can they connect with you? And where can they find Bullish?
Yeah, so for me, LinkedIn and Twitter. I'm more professional probably on LinkedIn than Twitter. I love Twitter. It's like my live journal. I share a lot of things, especially like cooking stuff. I complain about liking cooking and stuff like that, and TV. And so, yeah, so find me on those places. And then Bullish is bullish.co and our LinkedIn, which are both really active, and I work on both of them. So if you have any feedback or like our content, let me know.
I also feel like TikTok is my live journal, and it's just so fun to like have a creative outlet like that. So,
and everyone should follow your TikTok too.
Okay. Another
very important. I've been a long time follower, so well, it was cool to meet you in person and then chat today.
Awesome. Well, this has been truly so fun. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and yeah, can't wait to share this.
Thanks for having me.